My grandma used to live in a house that was ancient. The house was falling apart and had a termite infestation. We told her many times that she could move in with us if she wanted to, but she always said that she liked the house. 4 years ago, she passed away. It was a really tragic event. I didn't want to know what the cause of her death was, so I never asked. Probably natural causes. Her house was left to rot. It was abandoned. My mother fell into depression after my grandma's passing. She didn't want to talk to me or to anyone. She just locked herself in a room and only came out when she had to go to work or go to the bathroom. My dad worried for her. I wanted her to get better, so I started thinking of things that would make her happy. After going through many ideas, I finally came up with the perfect one. Her birthday was coming up, so I wanted to get her a present. I thought that getting her something that Grandma had owned would make her feel as if Grandma was still close to her. So that is what I decided to get her. I knew that most of Grandma's stuff was still in her house, so I was gonna go to her house and take something from there. I grabbed my backpack and my phone and hurried out the door. Good thing her house was close by. I entered the front porch. The smell of old wood lingered in the air. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I checked if there were any open windows, but there weren't any. I checked the back of the house and was surprised by something. There was a cellar door. I walked towards it and tried to open it, and to my surprise, it opened up. The only thing I saw beyond the door was darkness. I didn't have a flashlight on me, but I still decided to enter. Luckily enough, light came from outside to let me see what I was doing. There was nothing at all at first glance, just trash and dirt, but at second glance, I noticed a brown door in the corner of the room. I walked towards the door. My hands were trembling with fear, and my stomach was full of anxiety. I had no idea what the resolution of this was gonna be. I reached for the doorknob. It was cold and dull. I started twisting it slowly. The door opened and I forced myself into the room. I thought of going back, but it was too late. I nervously swallowed saliva and progressed to my destination. The room was dark and humid. The smell of dust filled the air. My eyes quickly darted towards a white box that was sitting in the middle of the room. The box looked like it had been beaten up. It had wrinkles and some writing on it. I walked towards it. I couldn't tell what the writing on it said. It looked like it was gibberish. I lifted the box up and put in my backpack. I wasn't gonna waste time opening the box. I had to leave. I advanced to exit the room when I heard a whisper coming from behind me. At first, it sounded like it was just the wind shaking a tree, but then I began to distinguish words. "Where are you going?" Goosebumps raced down my body. I looked behind me. The thing that was behind me was almost inexplicable. It was a young woman. She was missing half of her body. The skin on her face was torn apart, and you could see the muscles twitching and the blood spurting out. She also stunk of rotten meat. She looked at me. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. Should I run? I thought. My eyes. I want them back, she rasped. I ran out of the room as fast as I could. I went up the stairs and exited the house. I started to slow down when I was halfway to my house because I had to catch my breath. What had I seen back then? When I got home, I hurried to my bedroom. I tried to open up the white box by hand, but I was unsuccessful. It had too much tape on it. I went to the kitchen and got a knife. I cut open the tape and opened the box. A pair of eyes looked back at me. Inside the box was a pair of rotten, wrinkly, veiny, disembodied human eyes. I instantly let out a yelp. I didn't know what to do with them. I noticed a piece of paper behind the eyes. I went to my trash can and emptied out the eyes. I took out the paper. It was a picture of a young woman, exactly the same young woman that I had seen in the cellar. I heard something behind me. I turned around and discovered my dad giving me a confused look. "Why are you holding a picture of your grandma?" he asked placidly. Carl reached the end of his driveway and took a left. He was a bit puzzled as to why he hadn't gone in this direction yet. He moved in nearly 2 weeks ago, but so far, his nightly walks hadn't led him towards the overgrown thicket. The bent and mangled trees at the end of the street were covered in strangling ivy. Desiccated thorn bushes hid the rot that lay beneath. The dented old sign that stood before the path into the thicket was aptly lettered with the words, "Dead End." "Oh well," he mused to himself, "tonight's as good a night as any to see what lies in this direction." Following this thought, he lightly patted his back pocket. 2 odd protuberances met his hand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 C batteries. The absent-minded dummy had brought along fresh batteries, but no flashlight. He decided it didn't matter since every front lawn had a lamppost. They'd be coming on soon enough, but he was a bit uneasy. His father had taught him the importance of being prepared before leaving the house. He turned and glanced back the way he'd come. A slight bend in the road hid his quaint little bungalow from view. The decision to forego heading back to retrieve his flashlight was made when he stumbled over a raised bit of sidewalk. He agilely recovered himself and slowed his quickened pace. It seemed quite odd that he'd already walked so far in just a couple of minutes. His calculation of just how much time had elapsed changed when the sun disappeared behind the trees. The lamppost still hadn't turned on. Just then, Carl heard a strange noise. He spun around, but couldn't make out anything more than a few feet ahead. Something darted past him on his left. He quickly turned toward it, but once again, he couldn't see anything. The light breeze picked up momentum, carrying with it the same noise as before. Now stiffly at attention, Carl could make out a whimpering moan. He muttered, "Sweet Mary Joseph," under his breath. Suddenly Carl felt childish. He found himself out after dark, and there he was whispering, like a frightened little boy in need of a nightlight. He knew that all he had to do was step lightly and follow the sidewalk back home. He turned to head home, but just stood there looking ahead. I turned the other way and met with the same issue. He scratched his head. He thought. I turned back towards the way I came when I first heard that noise. Then I turned again, but then No, that's not right. Carl continued to look each way down the sidewalk, but he just couldn't determine which direction would lead him home. The mysterious moaning sounded again. It seemed much closer this time. Carl was shrouded in complete darkness now. He couldn't see his hand in front of his face. Finally, after all these years, he could now empathize with his younger brother, who was deathly afraid of the dark when they were children. He couldn't remember ever being in such utter darkness before in his life. He found it strange that none of the houses on the street had any lights on. Not even the bluish glow of a television emanated from any of his neighbors' windows. His thoughts mirrored his frustration and fear. Where's the moon? And why haven't the fucking lampposts turned on yet? Carl slided left until he felt the grass under his foot. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly as he spun around. He started walking guardedly with the grass and the edge of the sidewalk each supporting a foot. He decided to follow the invisible line between the 2 different types of terrain beneath his feet until the moon or the lamppost lit his way. The moaning came to his ears again. It was much louder now. Yeah, it's definitely not the wind. His unsteady thoughts reached for some explanation to calm his nerves. He was walking blindly, so he wasn't confident he could travel any faster than a toddler's walk. A moose maybe? Sure. There are pictures of moose all over town. I saw a moose crossing sign just yesterday. When I get home, I'll look moose calls up online. That's right, just concentrate on getting home and chilling out in front of the computer for the rest of the night. The tightness in his clenched jaw and the bunched wad of muscles in his neck loosened a little once he decided it was just a stupid moose. No moose could compare to the frightening creatures his imagination had begun to concoct. Just then, a lamppost came to life. He was so glad to see again, and there he was standing right in front of his house. He squinted his eyes to guard against the brilliant glare from the lamppost. Stepping into his yard, he looked side to side and noticed that no other lampposts were lit. Glad to be home, and feeling more than a little disconcerted by his strange excursion, Carl let the observation die on his lawn. He quickened his pace to his porch, and there, lying at the foot of the steps, were 3 newspapers. He remembered fetching the Sunday paper that morning, so he was more than just slightly puzzled. He picked up the nearest one, pulled off the rubber band, and unrolled it. Emblazoned across the front page in bold black was the heading, "Murder on May Street." The accompanying photo was of a police officer standing sentry over the path leading into the thicket. Carl glanced at the top of the page. Tuesday? I don't understand. He quickly skimmed through the article, while a horrible feeling began to bubble up from within him. The body of an unidentified man was found brutally. Carl dropped the paper and stumbled back onto his lawn. He slumped to the ground in shock and rolled onto his back. He could see the moon directly above him spread out across the night sky. It seemed so large and imposing. Just then, the lamppost went out. The moon offered no reprieve from the darkness as a loud moan echoed along May Street.